ExTrump campaign official Paul Manafort departs U.S. District Court in Washington on November 2, 2017. Bill OLearyThe Washington Post. Former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort and business associate Rick Gates will remain under home confinement and electronic GPS monitoring until they work out a deal to disclose assets and secure a bond package for their release, a federal judge said at a hearing Monday. U.S. District Judge Amy Berman Jackson of Washington added that in any deal, she would not permit the men to travel internationally, but would await further details reached in talks between the parties before issuing a ruling. Legal teams for Manafort and special counsel Robert S. Mueller III sparred in weekend court pleadings over the extent and disclosure of Manafort's assets as the Monday morning hearing loomed. Manafort, 68, and Gates, 45, pleaded not guilty October 31 in the first criminal allegations in Mueller's probe of possible Russian influence in U.S. political affairs. In previous court proceedings, prosecutors have said the scope of Manafort's wealth was unknown to the government, and appeared to be using the bail fight as leverage to pry out more information. Who's Who in the Government's Investigation into Russia Ties. View graphic. Who's Who in the Government's Investigation into Russia Ties. Prosecutors on Sunday evening pressed the court to require Manafort to represent the extent of his assets, in the United States and abroad, to secure bond. If financial arrangements are made that are satisfactory to the government, I am inclined to impose a less restrictive regime, Jackson said Monday. I'm not in position to grant either motion today. We're going to have to wait for consideration of further information. Jackson said she was inclined to release the men from home arrest and that the government appeared willing to be flexible on the issue, but was considering ordering the men to stay away from transportation facilities, meet a curfew and continue under electronic GPS monitoring. The two defendants have been under house arrest, with Manafort having pledged to pay $10 million and Gates $5 million if they failed to appear for future court appearances. The bond packages and assets that would be needed to secure their deals going forward were the reason for Monday's hearing. The pair were charged in a 12-count indictment with conspiracy to launder money, making false statements and other offenses in connection with their work advising a Russia-friendly political party in Ukraine. Ex-Trump campaign official Rick Gates arrives at the U.S. District Court in Washington on November 2, 2017. Bill OLearyThe Washington Post. Jackson in Washington had said Friday she believed each posed a flight risk significant enough to warrant remaining under electronic monitoring via GPS tracking throughout the case, and held to that view Monday. Manafort's lawyers in filings Saturday asked for his release from his condo in Alexandria, Virginia, and unrestricted travel in Florida, Virginia, the District of Columbia in New York, where he does business. They offered to post $12.5 million of his claimed $28 million in assets as security by way of his Trump Tower apartment, another condominium in Manhattan, a home in Palm Beach Gardens, FLA, and $4.5 million in life insurance policies held by trusts or his wife, Kathleen. Manafort's defense have rejected prosecutors' assertions that he poses a risk of flight based on his ownership of 3 passports, and on the registration in May of a phone and email account under an alias that Manafort used to travel to Ecuador, China and Mexico. While some reports painted the defendant as a Jason Bourne character, the facts were much more mundane. Manafort attorneys Kevin M. Downing and Thomas E. Zainal wrote Saturday in court filings. Manafort got a second passport so he could apply for visas when the first was being used, and applied for a third when he mistakenly thought the first was lost, they said. They did not specifically address prosecutors' additional claim in the indictment that Manafort had submitted 10 passport applications in 10 years. Traveling with a phone under his brother's name should not be surprising given the high-profile nature of some of Mr. Manafort's clients, his attorneys wrote, suggesting that such a phone arrangement was common practice to defend against confiscation or ring of theft. Finally, they said, one's frequent flyer status should not be overemphasized to show a potential risk of flight when a person's job requires extensive travel, referring to Manafort, who is an international political consultant. Substantial financial conditions, travel restrictions, and other conditions of release will reasonably assure Mr. Manafort's appearance as required, Downing and Zainal concluded. Prosecutors said in their Sunday filings ahead of the bail review that Manafort had yet to provide documentation to substantiate his claimed $28 million of assets or net worth. They previously said that Manafort had claimed $136 million in assets in financial documents in May 2016. The government seeks to further understand the extent of Manafort's wealth, Mueller team prosecutors Andrew Weissman, Greg DeAndres and Kyle Freeney wrote. Without that information, the government cannot be assured that whatever assets that Manafort pledges are sufficiently meaningful in relation to his overall net assets to reasonably assure his presence at trial. Once Manafort makes a disclosure of assets, prosecutors proposed lifting house arrest in exchange for a $10 million bond by Manafort secured by two individuals, such as his wife or a daughter, Andrea, and properties. They also proposed the court lay down conditions that he hold no passport, not travel outside Virginia, New York and Florida, and not encumber assets or transfer them overseas. Prosecutors questioned Manafort's claimed net value in his Trump Tower and Florida homes, and argued that the government has already sought the criminal forfeiture of some of Manafort's life insurance holdings if he is convicted. Other real estate in Alexandria and the Hamptons is subject to a $9.5 million mortgage, making them inappropriate as security, prosecutors said. Additionally, through at least 2014, Manafort reported a $6 million asset in Ukraine, before claiming that it lost all value, they alleged. Other claimed assets, such as securities, do not match information available to the government or are unsubstantiated, they wrote. The government is not prepared to consent to a change in the current conditions of release at least until Manafort provides an accounting of his net worth and the value of the assets that he proposes to pledge as part of his bail package, special counsel prosecutors wrote. Jackson, the judge, on Friday had been clear on her preference for keeping the men on electronic GPS tracking, saying, "Then I think if they leave and don't come back, we need to know where they went."